Keanu Reeves is coming out with a new movie, the fourth chapter of the John Wick saga, and it is probably going to be a hit. But the thing that you need to remember about it is that there's a lot of business lessons that people can learn if you're really paying attention to the John Wick saga. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, all right, Terrell, you're a finance person. Why are you talking about John Wick? And the reason is because there's a lot of things that the John Wick franchise is doing that every business owner should do if they're trying to be profitable and continue growing in their business. So stay tuned and I'm gonna jump into that.
Welcome to the podcast where we tell small business owners how to use the secrets and strategies that big businesses use to increase their profitability.
So now, when it comes down to the John Wick saga, there is something very interesting. And before we jump into that, I want to show you what the numbers look like. So let me make this a little bit bigger so people can see it. So when we're talking about John Wick, the first movie came out in 2014. And in 2014, when we looked at just the domestic sales, it did $43 million in box office sales. And as you can see, as more movies came out, the revenue kept growing for the box office sales. And then if you looked at it by theater, it wasn't like, hey, they did so much more in sales because more theaters picked it up. Like, yes, more theaters picked it up, but they actually made more money for every theater that they picked up. I think it went from something like 16,000 per theater to something like 44,000 per theater when you're just looking at the domestic numbers. And there's a lot going on with this. Now, I will say, for people who aren't familiar with the whole John Wick series or the whole John Wick saga, it is a story about a hitman who retired. His wife died of an illness, and for him to cope, he had this puppy. And there was a group of mobsters that ended up attacking him, and they ended up killing the puppy. So he goes out for revenge, which when you're going out for revenge against other assassins and other hitmen, it probably puts a target on you. So the rest of the movie is about him trying to survive all of those attacks. Now, the storyline is very, very simple, and it is very consistent, which is the very first point that I think every business owner should grasp, is that the reason why this movie does so well is because the storyline is very, very clear. When you talk to someone who's seen the movies and you ask them like, hey, what's the movie about? Typically, they're able to explain. It's not like this very complex or this very super complicated storyline. It is very clear, and people like that. So when it comes down to your business, one of the things that I see for a lot of business owners is that they end up having a product or a service that they really can't explain. So when you ask them like, oh, what do you do? They use these complicated words, or they explain it in a way that's like nobody else is going to understand what that is. So what I always say is that if you can't explain it in a simple way, then maybe you don't really understand what it is that you do. Because for people to buy it, they kind of got to understand what it is, or they either really, really got to like you. And for most people, they just don't like you that much to just buy something they don't understand. So here's a helpful hint that I tell a lot of business owners to do, is to go and talk to people who have already bought your product or your service and ask them, hey, how would you describe our product, or how would you describe what our service does for you? And really pay attention to what they say, because if you pay attention to what they say, that's going to help you understand a more simpler and clear way to explain what you do and what you have to offer. Now, the second point that I think is very, very important with why the John Wick saga has been doing so well and what business owners need to learn from them is those that are involved with the John Wick franchise, they understand the algorithms. And every business owner needs to understand the algorithms as well. Now, when we say algorithms, this can get very complicated, and people may say, well, I don't know if I understand algorithms. I'm not trying to get that deep into it. And I always say is that, we probably overcomplicated what an algorithm is in its simplest form. Now, I know there's going to be some computer engineer out there or some software engineer that tells me, hey, Terrell, that's an oversimplification. But I think that there is a much simpler way to explain it. So if you don't like my definition, you can leave me some comments. You can explain it. We can follow up about that later. But one of the best ways to understand what is an algorithm is to think about, that humans have been using algorithm for thousands, maybe even millions of years. And what we have called algorithms in the past is simply expectations. Because when you think about it, all an algorithm is trying to do is an algorithm is trying to predict what you expect to come next. It is looking at all the previous data, it is looking at all these different factors, and it is trying to predict what is this person or these people, what are they going to expect to come next, and how do I give them what they expect? So when it comes down to the John Wick saga, now, when you hear a storyline of, hey, the movie is about a retired hitman who is getting revenge because someone killed his dog, and now he's fighting to survive because other hitmen are trying to attack him. So when you hear that storyline, you kind of have an expectation of what the movie should be like. You have an expectation of what you should see when you go watch the movie. And the thing about the John Wick saga is they deliver on that expectation. So when it comes down to your business, the question I always ask people is, what is it that your clients expect from you? When they use your product or they use your service, what is it that they are expecting to get? What are they expecting to achieve? And does your product actually deliver on that expectation? Because the thing is, if your product or your service is not delivering on the expectation, those people are probably not going to tell other people about it, or they're probably going to leave you a bad review, or they probably won't buy your product again. So those are the two very big things that I always say that you should learn from the John Wick saga. And I will say the good news for all of the John Wick fans out there. The new movie comes out March 24th of 2023. So if you're interested in seeing the fourth part of the John Wick saga, good news, the movie comes out and you'll be able to check it out. But more importantly for our audience, when it comes down to running your business, you do want to keep those things in mind. Have a very clear storyline. Be able to tell people what it is that you do in the simplest terms. I know our egos tend to get in the way and we want to explain things in a very complicated way, but I would say is the simpler you can make it, the better, because when you can make it simple, not only will people understand it, but people are more likely to tell other people to buy your product because it is simple and it is clear. And then the second one is, don't forget your algorithms. And if the word algorithm is too complicated, then just replace the word algorithm with expectation. What do people expect when they buy your product? Or what do they expect when they use your type of service? And ask yourself, are you delivering on that expectation?